Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your space for black news, views, and opinions unapologetically. Today is Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. I'm Seth Lemon.
I'm Nielle.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Globo. And on today's report, the fight for voting rights heats up on Capitol Hill. Virginia's new governor bans mask mandates and critical race theory. And we have your COVID-19 updates.
Plus, opioid deaths have increased among black men, and we remember Tuskegee Airman Charles McGee.
We have so much to talk about today, soulmates. So are you ready? Let's get to it.
Well, we are 1 year into the Biden presidency, and for the very first time, this Senate has begun debating voting rights legislation today. It comes 1 day later than the symbolic deadline the Democrats had hoped to meet Monday, MLK Day. Now, canceling their recess this week, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer opened debate on the floor this afternoon, taking up the merged version of the John Lewis and Freedom to Vote Acts passed by the House last week. But it needs 60 votes to pass. That's all of the Democrats plus 10 Republican senators, which they do not have, in order to defeat a certain GOP filibuster and end debate. The legislation makes Election Day a federal holiday, expands early and mail-in voting, and it restores federal oversight over state elections. At least 20 states so far have passed restrictive measures stemming from misinformation in the 2020 election cycle. Quoting Dr. King, Schumer said Democrats have an uphill battle, calling the Republicans the Donald Trump party. Now, Senator McConnell criticized Democrats for characterizing the filibuster as a Jim Crow relic, saying that they want to unilaterally rewrite election law. Democrats plan to challenge the rule with a simple majority vote, and that proposal could come as early as tomorrow. Now, Schumer has not laid out specifics on how Democrats might do this, but Senator Tim Kaine, he said last week that this could amount to the one-time change or the carve-out in order to move that threshold from 60 to 51, and that in essence would make Vice President Kamala Harris the tie-breaking vote in order to get this done. We know the GOP is going to stand in the way, so at this point it kind of just remains to see how this political theater plays out.
Absolutely. I just want to, so NAACP President Derek Johnson, he released a letter as well to U.S. senators pretty much saying that American democracy could be in its final hours. And that's really scary. Final hours is just really, shocking to know that he could feel so passionately like we could be at the end. And I just really hope that we can just see some forward motion, because I don't really know what's going to happen, but I'm hoping that some good comes of this.
Well, we know that over the King holiday weekend that there were marches and rallies, as you see right there, across the country. Black Voters Matter, Martin Luther King III. So many people were out there in Virginia, in Arizona, which we know that's where Manchin and Sinema are. But another conversation is happening about strategically going after GOP senators that voted to impeach Donald Trump after the Capitol riots. So you have 7 GOP senators who kind of understand what's happening with voting rights. And so now is the time to, focus on Sinema and Manchin, but also start lobbying and caucusing and having conversations with Republican senators that have been in favor of impeaching Donald Trump, as well as have opened the doors to conversations about voting rights.
Yeah, and I will say this at the end of the day, Republicans are not going to budge. We know that. Even Stan Van Gundy, who was announcing for NBA, was making it very clear yesterday, in order to honor Martin Luther King, we have to push these voting rights bills. We have to push them through. It's for the right thing for the country. He speaks on it. Republicans need to get brave and stand up on their own feet and do as well.
Right. Now, President Biden is planning to sign an executive action on police reform, and it could happen as early as this month. Now, the plans would be similar to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that failed after bipartisan agreements could not be reached. Now, it is unclear what the executive action will be and how they would differ from the new restrictions the Justice Department imposed last year. The White House could unveil the executive action to mark the beginning of Black History Month next month in February. This is a good thing. It's a little reactive instead of proactive, which is what Black America wanted to see, that lawmakers, white legislators, were just as upset about what's happening to Black and brown people across this country. Nevertheless, we're glad that the White House is going to do something, because people want to see action from this administration, especially since black voters argumentatively delivered the election to the Biden administration. So this is good news for the Floyd family and all of Black Lives Matter and all of the organizations that continue to push for criminal justice and police reform.
I totally agree with you. If you think about it, the promise was made before George Floyd 1-year anniversary for the George Floyd Policing Act. It did not happen. Now they're saying by maybe the beginning of Black History Month, hopefully it does happen. The Biden administration has been on a major losing streak. They need to get some wins in a row, back to back to back, and I'm hoping this could be the beginning of that.
Yeah, Romeo, that's my fear, is that we keep having these deadlines. It's like, 1 year here before Black History Month, before MLK Day. And so when those dates come and then it's just another month, February, nothing happens, then what do? Then we try to make another deadline. And it kind of seems like the goalpost keeps moving backwards, that I really just want for the Biden administration, instead of trying to run and catch all these deadlines for us, just get what we need to happen done. Let's just make it happen in a timely fashion.
Yeah, this move for police reform is a last-ditch effort kind of by the Biden administration for them to make some moves on one of his signature policies. But it seems like he's trying to do all of this now ahead of the State of the Union address on March 1st, so that he can maybe have some key things to talk about. We'll see.
Another deadline. We'll see if that happens. A newly disclosed memo from Census Bureau officials cites, quote, an unprecedented meddling by the Trump administration in the 2020 census. The memo was written in September 2020 as the Trump administration was pressing the Census Bureau to end the count weeks early. The memo lays out several instances of political interference with the census, with the focus being population estimates used to calculate the number of seats for each state in the House of Representatives. And so, this was a large conversation that started online today. Was why is this coming out now? What is making right now the best time? We've all been wondering what happened 2 years ago, it feels like now. We've all been saying that the Trump administration had some kind of interference. And so what's making this come out right now? Are we surprised? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I worked as a partnership specialist for the census for a few months. So I was a part of the team that was out on the ground in the neighborhoods, black communities in general and LGBT communities, trying to get what the census specifically calls hard to count communities to respond to this information. We know that black and Latino families of color, are less likely to be inclined to respond to official government requests like this. So in general, there's always an undercount, but it doesn't help anyone feel confident about what the Census Bureau is doing when there are consistently changes like we saw back and forth. And now these things really have huge, tremendous impacts on lives, as we're seeing with the redistricting that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, why this is important is because you see that there was a collective effort by Republicans from the census. To your point, Seth, about redistricting, there are lawsuits happening all across the country from black and brown communities because representation is being taken away from people of color, and that is a bypart of the census. And then when you look at all of these voter restriction laws that are happening across the country, this is because this is how lawmakers of a certain race are trying to preserve their power. You do it through the census, what happens every 10 years. You do it through redistricting, and now you see all of these laws. So it's definitely a coordinated effort to keep power.
I agree with that. At the end of the day, Donald Trump's name continues to come up, whether you talk about census, you talk about the insurrection on January the 6th, we talk about the way he handled COVID-19, right? At the end of the day, they have to be able to tie him down and get him down on something. And I'm pushing the clock on that because 2024 is right around the corner. And if he wants to run again, we got to make sure, if you don't want that, you got to make sure you block that. And this is the way we can do it. All right, the head of the U.S. Treasury delivered an intense criticism of the economy and its negative impact on black people across the country. In a speech Monday, Secretary Janet Yellen said the financial system has never worked fairly for black Americans. The nation's top economist delivered her remarks in recorded speech for Reverend Al Sharpton's National Action Network on the MLK holiday. She referenced Dr. King's bad check metaphor, where she argued America's overdue payment and had been marked insufficient funds. Take a look.
From Reconstruction to Jim Crow to the present day, our economy has never worked fairly for black Americans, or really for any American of color. Well, since taking office last January, our administration has tried to change that, to ensure that neither the figurative bank of justice nor any literal economic institution fails to work for people of color.
Yellen said Dr. King knew economic justice is tied to the larger fight against injustice and promised the Treasury would do more to narrow the racial wealth divide. If you think about it, you got to take, for instance, the wealth gap between American whites and blacks is projected to cost between about $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. Think about that, right? The money we can have, we talk about generational wealth and how we need that, how we're not able to get homes like others, whether it's credit or whether it's wages or whether it's a position at a job because they just won't give it to us because of the color of our skin. These are things that need to change all the way down the page. And if we can change that, we might be able to close that gap just a little bit.
Yeah, and what she's addressing is systemic racism in our finance and economic, situation in our country. And this is how the system was set up. Like they say, the system is not broken. It's working how it's supposed to. And we know that it was set up to keep black and brown or people of color in a certain bracket, and that's beneath a certain race. And so when we have these conversations and we have like the the head of the Treasury Department saying something like this, it's actually hopeful to see maybe we'll get some fairness and equity when we look at housing, when we look at the financial institutions and how black and brown people are disenfranchised.
Yeah, it's important that Janet Yellen is acknowledging this debacle as the U.S. Treasury Secretary, but she didn't tell us anything new. We didn't learn anything that we don't know personally from experience. So I think I would have liked to hear a little bit more about what her department and the Biden administration is doing specifically to tackle this inequality when it comes to finances, but at least we're having that acknowledgement that we haven't had in prior administrations.
Absolutely. And she has influence, and so she could influence family, friends, but also the people that follow her. And so, like you said, Seth and EL, she's not telling us anything that we knew. It seemed kind of like a hollow, like a headline. It seemed more like, make sure you say this so that we can make this headline. But I would like to know, like, what her department is going to do, but more so also, why do you feel this way? What made you want to speak up and say this on our behalf? But happy that she did speak out on it.
Because she didn't have to say it on MLK Day.
Right, absolutely.
All right. Well, newly elected Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin hit the ground running after being sworn in on Saturday, signing a plethora of executive actions, 11 in all, on his very first day in office. They include ending the use of what's being called critical race theory in schools, as well as allowing parents to decide whether children should be masked in schools. His orders have quickly been met with backlash by school districts and administrators. Several schools issued statements saying they're going to defy the governor and keep their mask mandates in effect. And Richmond, Virginia Public School Superintendent tweeted that the Commonwealth of Virginia was literally created on the backs of enslaved Africans, adding that they will continue to be honest about its profound implications for our students and families. We're seeing this debate over critical race theory continuing as now newly elected officials try to cement their political opinion on the issue for the entire state. But critical race theory, again, is not taught in elementary schools. And so it almost seems like a political move to do this back and forth with mask mandates, playing with children's lives, and really letting parents decide whether their kids should be masked and what they should learn. Homeschool your kids if you want that much control.
I care the most, critical race theory, of course, we talk a lot about it. I care really about the mask mandates, because one thing that I always say is it takes nothing. That's the simplest way to help you protect yourself from COVID-19. Pediatric deaths, pediatric hospitalizations are up so much. Our children, the next generation, are dying due to COVID-19 because their body can't handle COVID-19 like someone as an adult can. And so I will never understand why anyone will want to pull back a mask mandate when it is something, a piece of cloth can help save so many lives.
Right. Well, two things are happening right here. We know as we look at the midterms coming up in various elections, from school board members to senators to governors to House of Representatives, we know that two of the hot topics are going to be COVID-19 and mandates, as well as critical race theories. So the Republican Party is just teeing up these talking points because they will play a significant role in the midterms coming up this year.
Absolutely.
Democrat candidate Sheila McCormick won her Florida congressional race by a landslide last week, but her pro-Trump challenger, Jason Marina, is refusing to concede. Now, Marina's campaign filed a lawsuit contesting the results of the special election before the outcome was even decided. He alleges there were problems with the special elections in Palm Beach and Broward counties. McCormick won the race by 59% of a point margin. She will be sworn in today. McCormick says she's not worried about Marina refusing to concede. She says at the end of the day, nothing can stop the motion.
The family of a 27-year-old who died suspiciously in solitary confinement inside a Southern California jail is demanding answers. An official autopsy declared Jelani Lovett's death in September 2021. It was an accident. A toxicology report, however, revealed the man who had fentanyl and heroin in his system. They say that he had that in his system when he passed away. His family has hired an attorney and filed a complaint questioning how the drugs could have been in his system while isolated in a single cell. His mother believes an alleged gang within the LA Sheriff's Department that reportedly runs the jail is what killed her son. The family's lawyer accuses the sheriff's office of negligence causing wrongful death, and the department maintains there was nothing out of the ordinary in Lovett's death.
Former NFL Kansas City Chiefs defensive tackle Celso Savia Jr. was discovered unresponsible at a Kansas prison. He was awaiting trial for federal charges on possession of illegal firearms and drug trafficking, said a prison official. Savia was attended by 2 prison staff and transported to a hospital where he was later declared dead. The prison did not release details about the former athlete's death.
A 74-year-old Tennessee woman has been exonerated after spending nearly 3 decades in prison due to a wrongful conviction. Check this out. Joyce Watkins and her boyfriend were convicted of first-degree murder and aggravated rape back in 1988 after Watkins' 4-year-old niece was killed. A pediatric expert doctor testified that the medical examiner's investigation was questionable and not a legitimate method for establishing a timeline. Now, Watkins and Dunn were paroled in 2015. Dunn died just before he was able to be released, but he has also been posthumously exonerated. How do you compensate someone for 27 years in prison for a crime that they did not commit? Is there any way to put an amount on the life that they have lost?
You know, well, the judge said we can't give them back their time lost. What I feel like their compensation is, he said we'll give you back your dignity. And what does dignity do after spending so much time in jail? Like, why do I need my dignity right now? You cannot pay my bills with dignity. You've already taken my dignity. You've already stripped me from my dignity, and you've left me in jail for almost 28 years. And so I'm with you. There's no amount of money that can cover that time lost. And so hopefully she spends the rest of her life doing something, you know, she hasn't been able to do. But like, to lose Charlie in jail is just like to have to die before you were
right. They were never reconnected.
Yeah.
Like, what does dignity do at this point?
I mean, this is the story of many black people in this country. It's really a sad thing. And so that's why it'll be really interesting to see what President Biden does with his police reform or criminal justice reform executive action, how much of the prison system, if any, will be in this executive order, and how he is really going to change the systemic racism that we face within our criminal justice and police systems in this country.
I agree 100%. At the end of the day, you know, we talk about these stories a lot. So I think there's a pattern. When you're first getting released, there's a sign of happiness, right? You're no longer behind bars. You're finally saying, look, you did not do this. But then reality sinks in when you've lost all those years. Family members, friends, who do you trust? Where do you start? And then there's even some anger in there as well. So mentally, they're going to need some help moving forward, even though she's out of jail. So we will continue to pray for her.
Yes. President Biden has nominated 3 people for the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors, including 2 African Americans. If confirmed, Lisa Cook and Philip Jefferson would round out the 7-member board. Cook would become the first Fed's black woman on the board. Now, the country's central bank is weighing options, including raising interest rates to help curb record inflation. Biden praised the nominees for their expertise in judgment and leadership, while lifting up their diversity of thought and perspective never seen before on the board. I mean, this is what representation matters. And we keep talking about this, but it truly matters. When you have somebody on a board that can relate to the different types of things that are happening in people's lives, African Americans, Latinos, Asians, as well as white, it creates for a diverse situation to have the change that we're looking to see. So I think this is an excellent call by the Biden administration.